11. Slander within marriage. Biblical law forbids slander within marriage, that is, slander by husband or wife with respect to their spouse. As Clark has pointed out, such slander makes a husband, for example, liable not only to his wife, but also to her family. This law is an important example of case law. If any man take a wife and go in unto her and hate her, and give occasions of speech against her, and bring up an evil name upon her, and say, I took this woman, and when I came to her I found her not a maid. Then shall the father of the damsel and her mother take and bring forth the tokens of the damsel's virginity unto the elders of the city in the gate. And the damsel's father shall say unto the elders, I gave my daughter unto this man to wife, and he hateth her. And lo, he hath given occasions of speech against her, saying, I found not thy daughter a maid, and yet these are the tokens of my daughter's virginity. And they shall spread the cloth before the elders of the city. And the elders of that city shall take that man and chastise him, and they shall immerse him in 100 shekels of silver, and give them unto the father of the damsel, because he hath brought up an evil name upon a virgin of Israel, and she shall be his wife. He may not put her away all his days. But if this thing be true, and the tokens of virginity be not found for the damsel, then they shall bring out the damsel to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her with stones that she die, because she hath wrought folly in Israel, to play the whore in Israel, to play the whore in her father's house. So shalt thou put evil away from among you. Deuteronomy 22:13-21. Before analyzing the implications of this law for its bearing on false witness, it should be noted that this is a most unusual law from the legal perspective. First, in every trial under this law, a conviction inevitably follows. Either the wife is found guilty, or the husband is found guilty for having brought false charges against her. When a marriage reaches this point, an inner penalty is inescapable. The public penalty is also inescapable when the matter reaches trial. Second, this law is also unusual in that it seems to reverse all normal procedure in court cases. In all other kinds of trials, the accused is innocent until proven guilty, and it is the duty of the witnesses to prosecute the case by providing evidence of guilt. As the Talmud gives evidence, witnesses to prosecute were still necessary, and a normal part of the proceedings in such cases. All the same, however, the wife must clearly prove her innocence. The reason for this unusual aspect of such a case is that the case is in reality a double prosecution. The husband has accused his wife of coming to the marriage with a background of unchastity. The father of the bride initiates the prosecution. He prosecutes the husband in order to silence the slander of his daughter, and as prosecutor he must produce evidence and witnesses, evidence of his daughter's virginity and witnesses to the slander. The husband must produce evidence of unchastity or pay a very heavy penalty. The fine and the penalty are worth noting in some detail. A fine of 100 shekels of silver, Deuteronomy 22:19, was a very considerable sum. A quarter shekel was considered a notable gift for a great man, 1 Samuel 9:8. The annual poll tax of all males in Israel 20 years of age and older was half a shekel, Exodus 30 verse 15. Under Nehemiah, with the Persian Empire providing many of the civil functions and also exacting a tax, the poll tax was cut to a third part of a shekel, Nehemiah 10:32. Thus 100 shekels of silver was an extremely heavy fine, and one which would virtually wipe out most husbands and make them, in effect, their wife's servant or slave thereafter. The fine was paid to the bride's father, and thus kept out of the control of the husband, who could nullify the effect of the penalty if the money were in his wife's possession. Control of the wife would then lead to control of the money. The father-in-law would not be subject to such control and could administer the funds for his daughter's and grandchildren's welfare. Not only was the husband so penalized, but all recourse to divorce was then barred to him. This did not mean that the wife now had a license to sin. She could still be put to death for any future adultery. Such an offense was a criminal action. The power of divorce was taken from the husband. Corporal punishment was also inflicted on the husband, Deuteronomy 22:18. On the other hand, the bride paid for her unchastity with her life. She was stoned to death, an ancient method of execution. Its place in the Bible is due to the ability of the witnesses and the community to take part in the execution, since the police power of the people required that they recognize their duty to witness and to execute in all cases of established crime. The principle of general police power is still valid and basic. It should be noted that this law has a lingering effect on divorce laws, in that, until recently, mutual consent did not terminate a marriage, but rather actual and proven guilt. Failure to prove guilt nullified the action. Now, to examine the law itself with respect to false witness, certain things must be noted. First, this is case law. If slander by a husband is forbidden, and carries such severe penalties, then slander by a wife is also forbidden. If the penalty is so severe for such a slander, then any slander between man and wife carries severe penalties in biblical law. The fine imposed for lesser offenses of slander would still be proportionately high. Clearly, therefore, biblical law requires a high degree of care and thoughtfulness of speech between husband and wife. Instead of being an area of laxity, where man and wife can cut loose with carelessness of consequences, marriage is an area where words must be weighed with a special care because the relationship is so important. Scripture gives extensive evidence of this requirement. Thus St. Paul declares that so ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loveth himself. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourisheth and cherisheth it, even as the Lord the church. Ephesians 5:28-29. St. Peter calls attention to the behavior of Sarah and her respectful speech and conduct towards Abraham. 1 Peter 3:5-6. An old Russian proverb states the matter pointedly, quote, "A dog is wiser than a woman. He won't bark at his master." End quote. Too many men and women are guilty of such stupidity. They bark and snarl at those nearest to them, and the consequence is only unrest to themselves. Any man or woman who belittles his or her spouse only hurts himself in the long run. False witness and a loose tongue bring only dishonor to a person. Second, the matter of slander within the family is a criminal and public offense, not merely a private matter. Damages are due to the bride's parents, and a penalty is imposed by the state, because the disruption of the peace of family life is a major breach of public peace and order. The centrality of the family makes slander within the family particularly dangerous to society. The charge is that the husband hath brought up an evil name upon a virgin of Israel. The wife is in this charge identified not in terms of her family, but the nation. The husband has lashed out at more than his wife and her family. He has attacked moral standards upheld and underscored by the nation itself. Third, this law in particular fines and punishes the husband. A fine of the wife would be in part a penalty on the husband also, and it would also be evidence of his inability to govern his own home. It is the duty of the husband to be, among other things, the protector of his wife and children. If he instead defames them, defames his wife in particular, it is an indication of both an inability to protect and to govern, and a sick mentality which invites shame and disgrace. The man has denied to his family a standard of godly conduct, which is a basic necessity of life. Another Russian proverb points out that, quote, "If the father is a fisherman, the children know the water." End quote. Its meaning is clear. The father's life has a major teaching function. Where the father fails to set a pattern of responsible and thoughtful life and speech, the children are deprived of a major stabilizing and educating force. A husband can defame his wife not only by speech but by distrust. If he refuses to allow her those duties and privileges which she is competent to administer, he has defamed her. To cite an example, a husband regularly belittled his wife's financial competence and often cited as a joke a foolish checkbook error she had made. The error was real enough, but it was not a true report of her character. Her little gift shop had twice saved him from serious trouble in his own business. On one occasion he had overexpanded too rapidly when business was very good and then faced bankruptcy. Her nest egg, derived from her shop, saved him, but it was never repaid nor publicly acknowledged. On another occasion, bad investments hurt him financially, and her funds provided a needed payment on his building. This husband regularly slandered his more capable wife without ever formally telling a lie. He simply cited a few facts which gave a false picture of a very capable woman. Truth itself can be slanderous if it is used to give a partial or distorted picture. Fourth, the 9th commandment requires that we bear no false witness against our neighbor, and this law makes it clear that our most important neighbor is our wife or husband. F. W. J. Schroeder observed that, quote, "Man is free only as he maintains veracity. The lie destroys his true freedom." End quote. Man finds his richest freedom in family life under God. This freedom is destroyed, and the home turned into a prison, where men and women bear false witness against one another. Fifth, turning again to the fine imposed on the husband, we get a further glimpse of the seriousness of slander within marriage. In Deuteronomy 22:29, we see that the fine imposed for rape or seduction, in a case involving an unbetrothed virgin and a young man without a criminal record, was 50 shekels of silver. If marriage followed, that is, if the guilty man were accepted as a husband, no divorce was possible. The fine for slandering a wife by a false accusation of premarital unchastity was thus twice the fine for rape and/or seduction. In either case, the fine was very heavy, but the penalty for slander is greater because it strikes at an existing marital relationship and undercuts it brutally. The ravished girl had a dowry of 50 shekels to take into another marriage if her father rejected the offender as a possible husband. She could begin a new life with another man with the advantage of an extra dowry, Exodus 22:16-17. The offended wife had no such opportunity. Her children might well bind her to her husband. The loss of the right of divorce was his, not hers. The fine was thus especially severe in order to prevent the occurrence of such offenses. In modern humanistic law, there is virtually an open season on slander within marriage, and the results are predictably bad. A final note. Virtually every people has a background of wife-beating, and on occasion husband-beating. There is no evidence of this in Scripture. The severity of the law with respect to slander makes it clear that by analogy, physical abuse is worse and unthinkable. A relationship is required between husband and wife which is grounded on faith, not fear.